Here's a bit of relevant context for the post. I grew up about 15 miles outside of downtown Portland, in a semi-rural area. We live on a windy country road in the hills, where the homes were spread quite a distance apart. Our closest neighbor was maybe a 10-minute walk away. Our house was set back off the road and had a gravel driveway that took a sharp turn, so you couldn't see the house from the road, and vice versa. One warm spring day when I was 10, I was riding the bus home from school. As the bus squeaked to a stop in my driveway, I looked out the window to my left and saw a man in a gray pickup idling aside the road, parked perpendicular to my driveway, almost blocking it. Being so young, I thought nothing of it, but when I got to the front of the bus, the driver held her arm out, blocking me from going any further. "Do you recognize that truck or that man?" I told her no. At that point, she opened her sliding window and motioned for him to move along. He looked at her and then looked back ahead and didn't move. He wasn't looking at a map or anything, just sitting there. The bus driver then got the intercom and told him he needs to move along, but he continued to stay there. Then she said, "Sir, you best move along. I'm not going anywhere until you're out of here." He finally left, and after a few minutes, the bus driver let me out, and she said she would wait several minutes for me to get up the driveway to my home. I told my mom what happened as soon as I got home, and the next morning she came with me to catch the bus and to thank the bus driver. I believe she gave her some sort of gift, but I'm not sure exactly. After that incident, my mom and stepdad hollowed out a section of the trees at the end of the driveway as a hiding spot. In that spot, my siblings and I could watch the road while waiting for the bus in the mornings, while nobody could see us. Anyway, this incident gives me chills when I think back. If my bus driver hadn't been so vigilant in looking out for me, and if that man in the pickup had been up to no good, I would have been a goner. Right after my driveway, there's a sharp turn and a steep downhill, and the bus would have been out of sight within seconds. There would have been no witnesses. This is a story about an old neighbor of mine. Me and my husband and 2 young kids moved into an old fixer-upper house back in the summer of 2015. I was in college full-time, and my husband agreed to stay home with the kids until I graduated, and we would slowly work on doing the house up, etc. Anyway, it was situated in a very small sleepy village in the countryside in Ireland. Everyone knew each other, and everyone knew your business. We had a neighbor called Johnny. He was a loner. The only living family members he had was a brother named Thomas, and he had no friends. He was an ex-alcoholic, but I still had a strong suspicion that he drank heavily most nights. He was a clean freak. Well, the outside was immaculate. His grass was the greenest, softest grass I ever saw, and nobody could touch it, or he would come outside yelling at you to get off his property. He had expensive garden statues, and it was like a lawn out of a fancy magazine. But inside, his house was dark and filthy. The floor tiles were black with dirt, and his ceiling was yellow from smoking cigarettes indoors and never opening the windows. His appearance was always unkempt, and he had bulging eyes and a demeanor of someone about to explode with rage. The day we moved in, he walked into our front garden and introduced himself in a rough way.
"I'm Johnny. I live next door. I've been living here 66 years, 8 months, and 21 days. Who are you two?"
Me and my husband thought he was a weirdo from the get-go, but were polite and explained that we just bought the house and planned to make it our family home. Then he said nobody should have ever bought in that house, that it was his late sister's house who had died many years ago when she was a young woman. We were taken aback by this, but said sorry to hear that, etc. He then turned and walked away, but stopped abruptly at the gate and said in a rage-filled voice,
"I cut the grass every second day at 10 a.m. Take care of this lawn and mine. Don't ever touch the grass."
Okay, sure, we said, not really thinking he's actually going to be serious about this now that we live here. I'm sure he'll just let us cut our own grass, etc. And we laughed it off. Turns out he was very serious. Every morning at 10 a.m., we would hear his lawnmower start up, and there he was, cutting the grass whilst muttering angrily and looking around, wild-eyed. My husband often went outside and told him, "Hey, it's okay, I'll do it." But Johnny would continue as if he couldn't see him. Johnny was also a hunter. He had 2 dogs he would bring with him, and he also owned a hunting shotgun. This freaked me out, as guns are rarely seen in Ireland, especially to be in the hands of someone so unstable. Then the really strange stuff happened. We were cleaning out the attic upstairs. We had all the trash to dump in the front garden, and Johnny storms into our garden yelling.
What are you doing?
He marched into the hallway and said to never ever go near the attic. My husband got annoyed at this point and told him to leave us alone. It's our house, and we'll do what we want. Johnny freaked out screaming. His dead sister's clothes are up there, and all her belongings, even her old-fashioned bicycle, and to never touch them, as they're not ours. Needless to say, we ignored him and put the stuff outside, and told him if he wants them that much, to take them into his own house. He stormed off and looked back at us, laughing maniacally. He freaked me out, but my husband said it's just some weirdo and not to take notice of him. The next day, the rubbish removal company were due to come and collect the stuff we decided to dump. We were surprised to see that the pile of old belongings was untouched all day. The following day arrived, and when we awoke, all the belongings were gone. No surprise as who took them. 2 days later, we didn't hear his lawnmower. We didn't so much as see him for 3 whole weeks. Then one day, while my husband was out of town, I was alone with the kids, and they wanted to go outside and play soccer. We went, but discovered all their soccer balls had kitchen knives stuck in them. Needless to say, I got freaked out and called my husband, who said to call the police, but I didn't think there was anything that they could do. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake terrified. Johnny was behind all of this. The next morning, I went downstairs early, and there Johnny was, stood in his backyard at around 5 a.m. It was still dark outside, and it was raining, but there was Johnny yelling.
Don't touch her clothes, Tommy. I'll kill you, Thomas. I'll kill you. Don't look at me like that with your sinful stare.
Again, I was pretty unnerved, and I felt like I shouldn't be seeing this. So I tried my hardest not to listen as I went to the living room. Later that day, I heard Johnny start up his lawnmower as I was in the backyard with my best friend, who decided to come visit for the day. Johnny saw us both in the backyard and stopped in his tracks.
You didn't tell me you had a sister?
"Oh, no," I said. "She's not my sister. She's my best friend." Then Johnny yelled.
You can't fool me. Wait until I tell Thomas what you tried to do. You won't be happy.
Then he stopped yelling and stared right at us with his bulging eyes, and in a very eerie, calm voice said,
It's clear you're sisters. You have the same flesh.
And he walked away, muttering angrily. We were both really freaked out at this point, and my husband was due home soon. We decided to both walk to a nearby store to buy milk, and as we did, a neighbor from across the street approached us. She explained that Johnny was a shady character, and the house we bought was in fact his late sister's house. But she hadn't just died all those years ago. She had been murdered in a very brutal fashion. She mentioned nobody had ever been brought to justice, as it was so long ago, and no one was ever a suspect in such a small village. Everyone, except Johnny. She said no one trusted him, but he apparently was questioned by the police and released without charge. I mentioned his brother Thomas, and she looked bewildered and said Johnny has no living family, and he never had any brothers at all. I was totally freaked out by this information and hurriedly rang my husband to tell him. He agreed Johnny was dangerous and possibly mentally unstable due to some undiagnosed medical issue like schizophrenia or something, but he made him uneasy, especially as we had young kids. The next couple of weeks involved Johnny yelling at Thomas some more and smashing plates on the floor every night, screaming,
Eat your dinner, Thomas, for God's sake. I've been cooking it all day. How dare you refuse?
My husband said we would just ignore him and he might stop. My husband also bought his own lawnmower to take care of our grass. One morning, he was just setting it up when out of the corner of his eye, he saw Johnny staring at him through an upper-story window. He could hear him muttering angrily, but he couldn't make out what he was saying. That night, things escalated. The kids had a sleepover at their friend's house, so we decided to paint inside and do some light renovation work. That night, there was a series of long, hard, angry knocks on the door. It was Johnny yelling, and in his hands was a shotgun, clutched so tight his knuckles turned white.
I told you, I warned you not to touch the grass.
As he said the last words, he kicked the front door down. He stood out in the hallway, reeking of alcohol and cigarette smoke. I genuinely thought we were both going to get shot. My husband tried to talk to him, but it was no use. He was getting angrier and angrier until he just abruptly stopped. He stared straight ahead, looking past us, and said,
I need you to bring me home. I don't feel well.
I protested, but my husband said to call the police, so I did. They took it very serious, seeing as there was a gun-wielding maniac in my hallway only moments ago, and now my husband had agreed to walk him just as far as his front door, not leaving my sight as I stayed on the phone to the police. As Johnny opened his front door, my husband said he caught a glimpse of the hallway. The walls were covered with yellowing newspaper clippings of the death of his sister, hundreds of them. He even had crude drawings my husband couldn't make out. My husband literally ran and jumped the wall dividing our homes. When he'd done that, he walked on the grass. Johnny came out with his gun, aimed right at him, and just as he did, 2 police cars showed up. Their timing was remarkable. Johnny had to be tased twice, but was eventually overpowered. All the time, yelling he didn't kill her, his sister. The court case is still pending, so I changed his name for obvious reasons. He's being investigated for his sister's death, as there's now been breakthroughs with DNA, and he's still aggressive and manic in jail apparently. He keeps saying Thomas will die without him. Who will look after Thomas? His house now lays empty and unloved. The once manicured lawn is now overgrown and wild. It has a creepy feel about the place, and the newspaper clippings still remain on his hallway wall. I'll update more once I get any new info.